It sounds like the start of some story I'd never have the guts to tell, but that night, it was nothing dramatic. Just the creak of the side door that never locked properly, and the sound of her voice drifting in like she owned the place. "Your light was still on," she said. I was sitting on the living room floor, half-finished cup of coffee next to me, wrestling with a broken radio I'd picked up from the repair shop where I worked. My shirt was wrinkled from the day, my hands black with grease. The quiet had been heavy, almost too heavy, until she broke it. She stepped in like she was crossing some invisible line. Mrs. Alden. Though she told me a dozen times to call her by her first name, it never landed naturally. She lived 2 doors down, mid-40s, always carrying herself with this sharp, self-possessed air. Not unfriendly, just untouchable. That night, though, she looked softer. Her hair was pulled back loose, no makeup, a cardigan slipping off one shoulder. She leaned against the frame of the kitchen door, watching me struggle with the little screws and wires like she had all the time in the world. "You're going to break it more," she said. I laughed, a quick, nervous sound. Wouldn't be the first time. Her smile was small, almost secret, the kind that flickers and disappears before you know if you imagined it. She crossed the room, not asking permission, and crouched beside me. Her perfume, barely there, something floral, mixed with the sharp tang of oil on my hands. The air between us felt suddenly charged, too close for neighbors who only ever waved across driveways. "Here," she said, taking the screwdriver from my hand. Her fingers brushed mine, barely, but enough. She tightened one screw with a precision that made me wonder if she'd done this before or if she was just pretending to know. I didn't ask. I didn't want to break the moment. The house felt too quiet, the tick of the wall clock behind us pressing into the silence. I found myself talking more than usual, stumbling into stories about the shop, about customers who argued over nothing. She listened in that still way she had, eyes steady, not giving much back, but not looking away either. It made me conscious of every word I chose, every fidget of my hand. When I finally risked glancing at her, she was watching me, close enough that I could see the faint lines at the corner of her mouth, the way her lips pressed together like she was holding back something. A comment, a smile, something. And then she looked away, just as quick, tightening the last screw with a deliberate twist. "There," she murmured. "Not so hopeless after all." The radio crackled faintly, as if it had been holding its breath, too. I wanted to say something clever, or at least thank her, but the words snagged in my throat. She handed the tool back, stood up, and smoothed her cardigan back over her shoulder in one practiced motion. "Well," she said, with that same almost smile, "I'll let you get back to it." And just like that, she left, quiet steps down the hall, the side door clicking shut behind her. The radio hummed on the floor, a weak station fighting through the static. But all I could hear was her voice, low and close. Not so hopeless after all. I sat there longer than I meant to, screwdriver still warm in my hand, wondering if she had meant the radio, or me. The next time we spoke, it wasn't in my house. She'd flagged me down in the driveway, holding a cardboard box that looked too heavy for one arm. "Could you?" she started, before I even had a chance to nod. Her garage smelled faintly of dust and paint thinner, the concrete floor littered with half-finished projects, stacked garden tools, and a canvas draped with a sheet. I carried the box in and set it down on a workbench, brushing my palms on my jeans. "Thanks," she said, pushing loose hair behind her ear. Her voice was brisk, polite, but her sagged like she'd been carrying more than just the box. I leaned against the workbench, not ready to leave. "You do all this yourself?" Her laugh was soft, almost reluctant. "Try to." She gestured toward the shelves, lined jars of nails, cans of paint, a half-broken lamp waiting for repair. "Some things just sit here longer than they should." I nodded, tracing the dust patterns with my eyes. She had this way of making the space feel alive and lonely at the same time. She pulled the sheet back from the canvas, half a painting, streaks of muted blue and gray across the surface. Her hand lingered on the edge like she hadn't touched it in a long while. "Looks good," I said quietly. "It looks unfinished," she corrected, her tone sharper than intended. Then, softer, "Sorry. I just don't show people this." Her guard slipped for a second, her mouth tightening as though she regretted letting me see. I didn't push. Instead, I noticed the small things. The way her thumb rubbed absent circles against the wood of the easel, the faint smudge of paint on her knuckle, the tired set of her eyes when she finally glanced at me. "You should finish it," I said, but not as advice. More like a suggestion I wasn't sure I had the right to make. Her gaze lingered, steady and unreadable. Maybe. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was charged, stretching thin between us. I shifted my weight, pretending to study the shelves. My pulse betrayed me, louder than the quiet hum of the garage light. She broke it with a small sound, almost a laugh. "You don't talk much, do you?" "Maybe not enough," I admitted. That earned me another one of those small, private smiles, gone as quick as it came. I left soon after, but not before she brushed past me to reach for something on the shelf. Her arm grazed mine. Bare skin, quick contact, but enough to send my thoughts spiraling. When I stepped back into the cool night air, I carried the weight of that brief touch with me, heavier than the box I'd lifted. And I kept hearing her voice, low and uncertain. "I just don't show people this." It was late when I found myself at her place again, an excuse about returning the wrench I'd borrowed, though I could have waited until morning. The air was heavy, restless. Rain pattered against her windows, the kind that turns everything outside into blurred shadows. She let me in without hesitation, cardigan wrapped tight around her, hair loose this time. The living room was warm but dim, just one lamp casting light across the books scattered on her coffee table. "Stay a minute," she said, almost absently, like she'd been thinking it before I arrived. I sank onto the couch, trying not to notice how close she sat when she joined me. She carried 2 mugs, set one in front of me. Her hand lingered on the handle longer than necessary, then pulled back quickly, as if she'd realized it. We talked in fragments. Her work, my shop, how the storm would probably flood the street again. I kept stealing glances, at the curve of her wrist, at the tiredness etched around her eyes, at the way her laugh sounded lighter here in the quiet than it ever did outside. At one point, the power flickered, and she exhaled a laugh that wasn't really a laugh. "Figures," she muttered. Something in her shifted then, her voice softer, her shoulders not quite as squared. She admitted, half under her breath, "I hate being alone when it storms." The words hung there, fragile. I wanted to ask why. I wanted to say you're not alone right now, but my tongue stuck. Instead, I nodded, gripping the mug tighter than I needed to. The silence stretched, her knee brushing mine lightly when she shifted. Neither of us moved away. My heart climbed into my throat. I could almost feel the pull of something about to break open. And then, her phone buzzed on the table. The name lit up clear on the screen. Daniel. I didn't ask who he was. I didn't need to. She snatched the phone up, her face tightening as she silenced it without answering. Her hand trembled just enough for me to see. I pretended not to notice, tracing the rim of my mug instead. But inside, I was burning, jealousy, curiosity, guilt, all twisted together. She set the phone down again, face unreadable, and turned back to me. "Sorry," she said quickly, too quickly. I wanted to ask, but I didn't. I wanted to reach out, just to still her hand, to steady that tremor, but I didn't. Our eyes met, and for a moment, neither of us looked away. The storm rattled against the glass like it was urging us forward. Her lips parted, like she might say something else, something real. But she didn't. And I sat there, heart pounding, waiting for words that never came. The storm had passed by the time I saw her again. A couple of days, maybe more. I'd been counting without admitting it. She knocked on my door this time. No excuse, no borrowed tool. Just stood there with her arms crossed like she was holding herself together. "Do you have a minute?" she asked. We ended up at my kitchen table, 2 glasses of water between us. The clock ticked in the corner, too loud. She wasn't wearing her armor tonight. No careful smile, no crisp clothes. Just a simple shirt, her hair damp from the evening air. I tried to fill the space with small talk, asked about her work, her car, anything. But she barely answered, her gaze fixed on the wood grain of the table. Finally, she said it. Quiet, almost a whisper, "What are we doing?" The words struck harder than if she'd shouted. I opened my mouth, but nothing came. Because I didn't know. Because every time I tried to name it, it slipped away. She lifted her eyes then, steady, searching. You come over. I come here. We sit, we talk, we linger. Her hand made a vague motion, like she couldn't quite define it either. It's not nothing. But it can't be, she trailed off. The silence after that was heavier than the storm had been. I wanted to tell her I thought about her when I shouldn't. That I replayed every look, every brush of her hand. That it wasn't just neighborly visits anymore. But the words clung to my throat like something forbidden. Instead, I said, I don't want to stop. Her breath caught. Just that, an intake, sharp and trembling. She leaned back, arms crossing tighter. You shouldn't say things like that. But it's true. Her eyes closed briefly, as if bracing herself. You're too young, she murmured, shaking her head. The room went still. Her words hung between us like a wall neither of us had built on purpose, but one that was there all the same. I searched her face, trying to read the lines of regret, of hesitation. But all I saw was exhaustion, the kind that comes from fighting yourself longer than you should. I don't know how to be around you, she admitted finally, voice raw. My chest tightened. I wanted to reach for her. I didn't. The silence stretched again, only this time it wasn't empty. It was full, of everything neither of us had the courage to touch. When she stood to leave, she paused at the door, her hand resting against the frame. She didn't look back. I can't keep pretending this is nothing, she said, barely audible. And then she was gone. For a week, she kept her distance. No knocks on my door, no casual waves across the driveway. Just the faint sight of her car leaving early, returning late, her blinds drawn. I told myself to leave it alone. I told myself it was better this way. But one evening, while I was locking up the shop, I saw her waiting by her car. She didn't wave, just watched me, like she was deciding whether to speak. Walk me home, she asked finally. We didn't talk much on the way, just the crunch of gravel, the faint chill of dusk settling in. When we stepped into her house, the air smelled faintly of old paper and rain-soaked fabric. She led me into the living room, gesturing for me to sit. I want to show you something, she said. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened a drawer and pulled out a small box. Inside were photographs, faded, some bent at the corners. She handed me one. A man, younger than her, maybe not much older than me. His arm around her shoulders, both of them laughing like the world was easy then. He was everything, she said softly. And he left. Not by choice. A car accident, years ago. The words weren't dramatic, not even bitter. Just plain, like she'd repeated them too many times in her head. I looked at the photo again, then at her. And I saw it. The echo of grief in the way she carried herself. The reason for the quiet walls she built around her life. You remind me of him, she whispered. Her voice broke on the last word. So faint I almost thought I imagined it. My chest tightened, heat rushing through me, not of pride, but of something heavier. I didn't know what to say, whether to apologize, to comfort, to step away. She sat beside me, staring at the photograph as though it might fade if she blinked. Sometimes, when I look at you, it feels like I'm seeing him again. And I don't know if that's fair. To you. Or to me. I swallowed, the weight of her confession pressing down hard. Every moment between us suddenly felt different, charged not just with longing, but with memory, with loss that wasn't mine to carry but that I was tangled in now. I wanted to tell her I wasn't him, that I could be something else. But the words stayed lodged, useless. Instead, I set the photo down carefully, the silence stretching. Her hand lingered near mine on the couch, not touching, just there. A distance so small it could have vanished with one movement. Neither of us closed it. And in that pause, in that almost touch, I realized something had shifted between us forever. After that night with the photographs, we didn't speak for days. Not out of anger, but out of something heavier, like we were both carrying the same fragile glass and afraid to drop it. Then, one evening, I heard the knock. When I opened the door, she didn't say anything. She just stood there, her arms wrapped loosely around herself, eyes tired but steady. I stepped aside, and she came in. We sat at my kitchen table again, though neither of us touched the glasses of water I'd poured. The clock ticked. The fridge hummed. My heart raced. Finally, she said, I don't know how to stop this. Her voice wasn't angry. It wasn't pleading. It was bare, stripped of everything but truth. I leaned forward, elbows on the table. Maybe we don't stop it. Her eyes flicked to mine, searching, cautious. You think it's that simple? No, I said. But I think it's real. The silence that followed wasn't sharp this time. It was softer, like the kind that happens when you're both waiting for the other to breathe first. She dropped her gaze to the table, her fingers curling against the wood grain. I watched her hands, those strong, graceful hands that had fixed my radio, held old photographs, drawn invisible lines she never let me cross. Slowly, carefully, I placed my hand near hers. Not touching, just there, waiting. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then, finally, her fingers slid the smallest distance across the table, brushing against mine. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a kiss or a confession, but it was everything. Her shoulders softened, her eyes closed briefly, like she was letting herself exhale after holding her breath too long. I turned my hand, letting our palms rest together, warm and steady. We didn't say love. We didn't say anything, really. We just sat there, hands joined, the world outside falling away until all that was left was the quiet pulse of something neither of us could deny anymore. After a while, she leaned forward, not a kiss, not even close. Just her forehead resting against mine, still as stone, fragile as air. And in that silence, I knew, not that it would be easy, not that it would last forever, but that it was real, and that we had both stopped pretending otherwise. The moment didn't need words. It ended on its own, the kind of ending that feels less like a finish and more like a truth settling in. We stayed like that, forehead to forehead, hand to hand, until the clock ticked past midnight. And neither of us pulled away. Looking back now, it doesn't feel like there was one single night when everything changed. It was slower than that, quieter, like rain soaking into the ground until you realize the earth is different under your feet. I still remember the first time she walked into my house without asking, teasing me about breaking that radio. If you told me then where we'd end up, I wouldn't have believed you. I thought I was just a neighbor fixing things in silence, keeping to myself. But sometimes the people you least expect, the ones you pass in the driveway, nodded across a grocery aisle, end up being the ones who shake your whole life loose. She's still guarded, in her way, still carries pieces of a past I'll never fully touch. But something shifted between us the night she admitted she couldn't keep pretending. It wasn't about love at first sight or some reckless fling. It was two people, different ages, different histories, finally admitting they were human enough to need each other. I've learned that love, if you want to call it that, doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it sits across the table from you, sipping water, avoiding your eyes, and the silence says more than words ever could. What changed in me? Maybe it's that I stopped waiting for life to feel safe before I lived it. I realized the weight of longing isn't something you outgrow. It's something you learn to carry, if you're lucky, with someone who doesn't let you carry it alone. And her? I think she learned she doesn't have to keep every part of herself locked away. That even after heartbreak, there can still be laughter, still be warmth. That it's okay to let someone see the unfinished painting, the unguarded silence, the trembling hand. We never said the big words. We didn't need to. The way she lets her hand rest in mine, or the way she lingers at my door instead of walking straight home, that's enough. So if you're listening to this, wondering whether this is a story about forbidden love, or second chances, or just two lonely people finding each other at the wrong time, maybe it's all of those things. Or maybe it's simpler. Maybe it's just about not turning away when you feel that spark, even if you don't have the perfect words for it. Because sometimes the quiet moments, the unfinished sentences, the almost confessions, are where the real stories live. And this one is ours. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?